Thanks for joining us. This is Omni View, episode 81, Balanced News Perspectives. Today is June 14th, 2026. Let's look at the day's news from every angle, the week's biggest developments pulled together, what actually moved, why it matters, and what to watch next. Strikes between Israel, Iran, and the United States have taken place at specific industrial sites over recent days. The Guardian and France 24 describe these events as a dangerous escalation that risks drawing in wider regional actors and undermining diplomacy. Israeli reporting stresses defensive necessity after perceived threats, while Iranian state media presents the response as proportionate retaliation against joint U.S.-Israeli actions. Both sides agree strikes occurred at specific industrial sites, yet they differ on whether the moves represent a return to open conflict or limited signaling. The strongest case for restraint rests on the shared interest in preventing broader economic disruption and loss of life, a position emphasized by Trump. The strongest case for continued pressure rests on the view that unchecked attacks invite further aggression, a position advanced by Israeli officials. What evidence would show whether these strikes are limited or the start of wider fighting? Shifting now to developments around the Strait of Hormuz. The strait has remained closed for 100 days amid the tensions. CNBC reporting highlights immediate market reactions and shipping risks tied to the closure. The strongest case for rapid diplomacy rests on the shared interest in avoiding prolonged disruption to energy supplies that raises costs for households worldwide. Supporters of this approach argue that reopening shipping lanes quickly limits inflationary pressure on food and fuel. Critics contend the emphasis on speed risks overlooking verification steps that prevented earlier violations. Both sides agree the strait remains a critical choke point, yet they differ on whether interim security guarantees are sufficient before full reopening. What verification measures would make any agreement durable? Next, the sequence involving a helicopter incident near the strait. U.S. authorities frame the restriction as a necessary step to prevent sensitive technology from reaching potential adversaries. Outlets including The Guardian describe the back and forth as a rapid slide into escalation that both sides have previously managed to contain. The strongest case for the U.S. position rests on the need to deter attacks on its forces and maintain credible deterrence after a direct loss of equipment and personnel risk. The strongest case for Iran's position rests on the principle that any foreign military action on or near its territory requires a visible response to preserve domestic credibility and regional influence. Each side's advocates note that further rounds risk drawing in additional actors and raising costs for their own populations. What evidence is presented for the sequence of the helicopter incident? Ongoing strikes have continued on consecutive days while talks stall. The Guardian frames the escalation as a collapse of fragile diplomacy, stressing that both Washington and Tehran continue limited strikes. U.S. officials emphasize the need to pressure Iran into a durable agreement, while Iranian statements highlight the lifting of sanctions as a core requirement. NPR presents the developments alongside World Cup coverage, treating the military action as one element in a busy news cycle. Both sides agree strikes have occurred on consecutive days, yet they differ on whether these actions represent defensive necessity or provocation that blocks any path to de-escalation. Which diplomatic channels remain open? Renewed diplomacy efforts have been discussed as a path forward. U.S. officials emphasize that renewed diplomacy offers the quickest path to de-escalation and economic stability for energy markets. Iranian state media stress that any accord must address core security concerns before commitments are finalized. Trump administration negotiators argue that pausing military action preserves leverage for a broader settlement covering Lebanon and other fronts, while avoiding unnecessary escalation costs. Iranian officials countered that sanctions relief must be irreversible and tied to verifiable steps on both sides, noting past withdrawals from agreements left them exposed. How might verification mechanisms in any deal address past compliance disputes? A separate development involves U.S. restrictions on high-end AI models. U.S. authorities framed the restriction as a necessary step to prevent sensitive technology from reaching potential adversaries. Technology companies affected by similar rules have noted the practical challenges of enforcing access limits across global user bases. Civil society observers point to the risk that such measures could slow collaborative research and widen divides in AI capability between nations. Both sides agree the directive targets specific high-end models, yet they differ on whether the security benefit outweighs the impact on international scientific exchange. What precedent does this set for future technology export rules? A legal theory from the 1980s continues to shape discussions of presidential power. The Christian Science Monitor reports that the unitary executive theory underpins arguments about the scope of executive authority today. Supporters see it as restoring constitutional balance by limiting independent agencies, while critics argue it concentrates too much power in the presidency without sufficient checks. Both sides accept that the theory traces to earlier legal writings, yet they differ on whether current applications expand or clarify original intent. How might court rulings on this theory affect future executive actions across administrations? Now, to really understand the Strait of Hormuz closure, there is a mechanism most coverage leaves out. The waterway has been shut for 100 days, yet oil prices have not risen sharply as many expected. One key factor is that global inventories were already elevated before the closure, giving markets a buffer that delayed immediate price spikes. Another element is the rerouting of some tanker traffic through longer alternative paths, which raised shipping costs but spread the impact rather than concentrating it in a single price surge. Next time you hear claims that any closure automatically drives prices to record levels, ask yourself what inventory data and rerouting capacity actually show in that moment. Before we go, watch for further statements on the timing of any potential peace agreement in the region. That wraps up today's Omni View. Remember, the best informed people read more than one perspective. If this show helps you do that, share it with someone who values fair coverage. See you tomorrow. And before you go, this show is part of the NARA Network, a family of daily podcasts covering tech, science, markets, and more. If you enjoyed today's episode, give Tesla Shorts Time a listen, your daily deep dive into everything Tesla. You can explore the whole lineup at neuranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice, editorial selection, and analysis are my own.